Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining the Choice Solutions webinar. We are going to get started in just about 30 seconds. Just want to give people a little bit more time to get settled in. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining the Choice Solutions webinar. I'm Ellie Mansour. I'm the marketing manager. Just want to give people a couple more seconds to get settled in. Thank you for your time this morning or afternoon, depending on where you are. Okay, let's go ahead and dive in. I'm going to go ahead and pass the baton to Dana Steinlogi.
Great. Thank you, Ellie, and good day, everybody. I'm Dana Steinlogi. I am one of the partners here at Choice Solutions and co-lead up our sales team. And just on behalf of our team and our organization, I want to thank you for taking time to be with us here today and to go through some of the content we have and insights. So, oops. Fix that. There we go. So yeah, just one of the things, our goal here today is to just share insights and education with you. Obviously, within the news lately, within last couple of weeks, 2021, even it's just building up momentum-wise. But there's always something new in the news, just from security and related incidents, attacks, various things like that. So our goal here today is simple, and that's to deliver education and insights to hopefully bring value to you, to your team, to help you either check off some things and validate things you're doing right, or maybe think about some ideas that might help improve something as basic, as patch management as a part of your vulnerability management strategy. So just going to share real brief about our team, about our company before we dive in, turn it over to Chris and team to share, just for those who aren't as familiar with Choice Solutions or our company. So we've got primarily a presence in the central part of the US and expanding and growing into the Southeast as well, just through skill sets, reputation, referrals. We've had the great pleasure and opportunity to serve, over 750 different companies across 43 different states over the last 5-6 years. So some of the things that we know you're dealing with as an organization across the board and listening with our customers is everyone's dealing with some level of constraints and challenges within IT. So it could be, keeping up with the daily operations, the day-to-day upkeep, some of the simple things that if you don't take good care of, kind of might, bite you down the road. The inability to maybe focus on projects, whether it be strategic projects or that maybe be regular projects that just need to be done. All the while tackling challenges you might have with, a lack of, and just not having the depth of in-house expertise you need to be able to keep up on everything, or challenges your organization is just facing with, talent development and retention within your staff and organization. So at Choice Solutions, our goal, we're here we want to be a trusted IT partner to the organizations we're a good fit for. Some of the things I think you'll find in working with us is in knowledge and expertise, a great track record. We take a very consultative approach, so we want to listen and we want to understand your objectives, your goals before we work to put together anything. We've had the opportunity, we have a lot of great innovative solutions and services, technology partnerships we've had just historically through the years that we'll bring to bear into ideas that we might have when we learn about challenges you might be facing and problems you're trying to solve. And genuine people that are focused on doing what's right and serving you as a customer and your needs first. Our goal is to help you adopt a simpler, more secure IT environment. So from the data center or the cloud service all the way out to the secure endpoint in today's hybrid workforce. So again, it's you're dealing with the transformation of the cloud. What level of cloud approach to take. You've got a workforce that might be hybrid in the office, needing to also be able to work from home. Need to make sure they have the security whether they're in the office, on the home, working from home, working on the go, we have a distributed enterprise, just solutions like that. So we can be a partner for you in acquiring technology solutions, whether it be leading edge software organizations, Microsoft, Citrix, Nutanix, other leading innovative software organizations, infrastructure solutions or cloud services. But we also think what we feature is an excellent in-house professional services team. So when you're looking to adopt something new in your organization, helping you deploy that, helping you design it, plan it, but also helping with ongoing health checks, reviews, and unlocking new technology. And then we have a managed services organization team to help companies and be a partner for you when you might be challenged with keeping up with the day-to-day and the operational needs that you might have in your organization. So that's a little bit about us. We've got a lot of awesome customers we've had the opportunity to assist. This is just one example of a video case study. We've got many others on our website that we've had the opportunity to assist and serve, especially kind of in this area that we'll be kind of talking a little bit more about today. So with that, I'd like to introduce you to Chris Watson. He is the security lead from our organization. Chris is a very accredited security professional and also a fantastic kind of educator and teacher. So I think he'll do a fantastic job of just sharing insights and helping you with questions you might have. And before we go further, I do want to say, if you have any questions as Chris is going through anything, just please make sure to post them in the chat window, and we'll get to them as we can, or we'll also get to leave some room at the end as well. So Chris, I'd like to transition over to you, and thanks for sharing with the team.
Hey, thanks, Dana. Super kind words. The check's in the mail, of course. Good morning, everyone. And again, like Dana said, thank you, welcome. Good afternoon to our folks on the East Coast. Just looking forward to talk about something that in the area of security, there's a lot of really exciting things, right? We see it in the news all the time. Companies being hit with ransomware, email exploitation, your employees are clicking the wrong thing. You might have clicked the wrong thing, and that's okay. What we want to talk about today is patch and vulnerability management. And that's something that tends to be overlooked sometimes in organizations, or we're not really sure who owns it. Is it an infrastructure problem? Is it a security concern? Where does that risk and priority lie? So before we get rolling into anything, I still have my vest as a no-school hall monitor. But as Dana said, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask at any time. I want this to be a conversation. I'm still getting used to not being able to have these sessions in person with COVID and everything. But again, thanks. So to get started, we do have a quick question. Just to sort of get you thinking about where you are today as far as your patch management program. I think there's a poll that's going to pop up. Yep. And I want everybody to know that this is a safe place. Awesome. Well, while that gets counted up and tabulated, let's jump in. We've all watched the news over the last couple of weeks, and the last few months has been super active for cybersecurity. So we're going to talk about some of those high visibility exploits, some of those things that you may have seen in the news, some things over the last few years that may have fallen off the radar that are still around. We are going to talk about the difference between vulnerability and patch management. We're going to give you the 10-step treatment, just like sort of a BuzzFeed deal, on how to sort of align your patch management program. What steps can we probably integrate, or how do we get started today? And then 3 different ways that we can do it. So we'll spend a lot of time on that. I'm sure you guys will have the slides. All right, what's it look like out there? Other than what we see in the news, we all know that there's a multitude of threat vectors out there that face our organizations every day, not counting, insider threats from either Malicious Mike or Careless Carol. There's also, again, email security is still, the primary vector of entrance into a secure environment. But a lot of those data breaches can be linked back to a patch or a vulnerability that was left just sort of out in the open. It is incredibly hard to keep up with. Just last year, I found this really huge number. 18,000 CVEs were released and investigated last year. That's 18,000 things that I at least have to look at to see if my company is affected at all and how we can mitigate it if that's the case. Looking at the graphic, just to let you know how busy it's been this year already, we're already looking at 7,000 CVEs that have been submitted to the Department of Homeland Security CERT program, our MVD or NIST MVD program as well. And this is only numbers for the beginning of May. So it's sure to be a really wild ride this year. The bottom one is just a stat that I want to focus on, and we talk about the time to patch. And this is showing that the average time to patch is 102 days, so 3 months that you have what's called a window of exposure. And the reason why average time to patch is so important is with patch management, we're racing the clock. This graphic is a great timeline of how it works as far as when a vulnerability is introduced versus when is it finally patched and closed. And when we look at that window of exposure, a lot of that is contained in that 0-day sort of category. But what we really need to worry about is what happens when that patch is released. Your IT teams are not the only ones watching for Patch Tuesday. That's where attackers find out what's open. And so it becomes a race between your IT team getting the patches applied versus the attackers being able to develop and deploy an exploit based on what that patch addressed. And unfortunately, time is not on our side as an organization. I watched a demonstration. It was kind of scary to watch, but it was for a major browser. And patch came out, and they were watching the commits to this application as the patch was being applied. And within 7 minutes, we're able to turn that around into an actionable exploit. So when we're talking about organizations patching in a matter of days, months, these attackers are able to work in terms of minutes and hours. These are very talented individuals who, if they use their powers for good, they'd be, the next Bill Gates, something like that. And the other thing with time too is, we're told by our manufacturers, hey, 30 days is a recommended window. You want to get these out within 30 days. The problem with that is organizationally, I may not have the cycles to make sure I can get that done in 30 days. But what happens in the in-between? The day the patch was released, a Patch Tuesday, which this month was last Tuesday, to 30 days later. What does that look like for me from a threat landscape and from a risk of exposure? Your security teams have a lot of requirements on them. Even if it's a dedicated CISO, or you have somebody sort of wearing an extra hat as a security guy, or maybe patching and vulnerability management is a sysadmin role in your organization. There's a lot going on just in the security space, and I don't expect you to read the graphic. It's a great graphic. I can share it with you, but I just want to show that patch and vulnerability management are just a small part of the equation that we're working with within a contemporary security environment. These are major parts, so their size on this chart is in no means indicative of how important they are, but it is a matter of resources and priority. How is your IT team able to get these things done in the right amount of time? How do we decide what's critical, what needs to be patched today versus what can wait a little bit? And then balancing that with the risk of, how long can I stand for this machine to be down, and considering that risk equation as well. These are stories you've heard, right? Apache Struts back in 2017. The patch was released. It's an open source product, so those guys tend to be a little more community driven as far as releasing their patches and vulnerability addressing those vulnerabilities. But you had a large organization that was able was exploited via this vulnerability. Equifax ended up losing over 143 million records. And that's something that record release is something that we're still seeing repercussions of 3-4 years later, as you're seeing a rise in things like unemployment insurance fraud and things like that, other sorts of identity theft and things like that. Bluekeep is one I keep as an example, because Bluekeep, Microsoft, they were really great. They released the patch, they communicated it well. This came out in 2019. As of March of 2020, however, there were still over 377,000 systems that had this vulnerability exposed to the outside world. So this is a case where Microsoft released the patch, but if there's no patch management program or no priority on patch management on the user end, then the equation is not complete at that point. Some of you on this call are probably still dealing with some of the Exchange outbreak or outlay from the March 3rd 0 day. These are breaches that started out, unfortunately, back in January. And the FBI was involved, and we all know how crazy that got. And it was just Microsoft says, hey, not only patch, but patch today, like right now. Don't wait till tonight, patch today, because we were seeing this being exploited in the wild. So there's a risk balance there as well. Do I take the time to test, or do I just sort of trust in my manufacturer and deploy that patch right away? Spectre is a great example of evolution, right? It was an Intel vulnerability in the chipsets that gave just low-level access to information. And they fixed it, and then here we're finding out a couple weeks ago, 2021, that, well, Spectre's not quite fixed. They can go around that mitigation. The problem with that is, again, balancing the resources and time that'll be taken to patch this versus what's the real risk scenario there. A lot of professionals will tell you, well, if they're at the point where they're reading your CPU cache, they're already too far into the system and you've got a security incident already. And so balancing that time, effort, and energy versus the probability of it happening. Real quick, I just wanted to touch on vulnerability management versus patch management. These are terms that sometimes get thrown around interchangeably, especially outside of sort of the IT sphere. It's all the same, right? Not quite. Vulnerability management also is going to include identifying those vulnerabilities and any remediations that may not be software related. So patch management is going to be maintaining the software environments, whether that be the operating system or third-party applications. Those are things like Oracle, pushing Java updates, or Adobe. I'm sure we all are glad to be done with Flash updates and things like that. But that's the primary difference of the two, is patch management fits within your overall vulnerability management strategy. So why patch? It seems like it's really basic, but what's driving that equation? It really just comes down to two things: security and compliance. And I've had some organizations say, well, I passed my last compliance audit. We did an assessment, we passed it, we're good to go, right? And that's a conversation that you have to have, that compliance does not equal security, and what's secure is not always compliant. But these are the things that drive the patching conversation. We wish that there was an altruistic approach to, well, I need to patch it because that's what I need to do. We have to know that things and priorities are driven by requirements that are sometimes third party or sometimes within an organization, depending on how your governance for your IT program is run. There's other reasons to patch. There's feature updates. You don't want to buy a Ferrari but only drive it in first gear, right? So that a lot of times security patches and vulnerability fixes are packaged with these feature updates. So make sure you're looking through those and seeing what's actually being pushed. So 10 easy steps. I put easy in quotes because easy depends on your organization. It depends on your resources and your organization's risk tolerance. But the big ones are definitely going to be discovery. You don't know what to patch if you don't know what's out there, if that makes sense. I did give an example on this when I did a software inventory for a company, 60 to 70 users, and they had over 1,100 different versions of applications. So that may be like, some guys got Adobe Flash 13, one guy's got 14.1. But how do you maintain patching for that when you're unaware of what users are doing? And that really goes back to governance as well. What do you allow your users to do to make sure that your IT department can keep visibility on what's in the environment? Categorization is a business conversation a lot of times. I know as an IT professional, it's very easy for me to go, well, I need this server, this firewall, and these things have to work for me to do my job. But at the end of the day, my function is to support the business. So I need to talk to the business and say, hey, what systems have a criticality to your operational continuity or to your revenue stream? What can we risk? What can we take a risk with? What can we do without for a couple of days? And that's a real conversation that you have to have between your IT leadership and your business leadership as we move forward together and align those principles. 3 and 4. 4 is a big one, monitoring for patches. We can all raise our hands and say, all right, who looks at patching on Patch Tuesday? And the Wednesday after is just sort of, that's a big paradigm that we have to get away from as an industry, of waiting for the companies to come to us on Tuesday, and that being the special day. Our attackers know what Patch Tuesday is. And so we want to be able to stay ahead of them from an intelligence curve. Also, companies don't always release all their patches on Patch Tuesday. An issue I ran into with one organization is, well, we pull our patch report at 8 a.m. on Patch Tuesday. Well, it turns out that Microsoft released a cumulative update for their servers at 3 o'clock that day. So if they aren't going back and checking and constantly monitoring that environment, they missed out on critical patches. So there they are exposed for potentially that next 30, 31 days to the next Patch Tuesday. It's not just a one-day gig. Testing your patches, and sorry, going back to monitoring for patches, the other thing too is the time sync. When we look at steps 5, 6, 7, somebody analyzing the patches, doing the research, finding the known issues, testing the patches on, not on production systems. We've all been taught that since day one, right? Don't test in prod and don't do it on a Friday afternoon. But it's amazing how many companies are just allowing end users to decide when and where they patch their operating system because it's more convenient on the user. I get that, and that's a balance we have to strike. But working with other organizations, I've worked with an organization where one InfoSec security, one security specialist was spending 20% of his week just doing vulnerability assessment, analysis, and making the tickets and following up on it. So think about that from an organizational standpoint. Do I have, the bodies and the hours and the resources to dedicate a 20% chunk of man hours to a patching task? Is that something that I need a team for? Is this something that I need a single FTE for? Those are things to consider. 8 and 9, we audit and we report. I find that on things that I report on, or the things that my director asked me to report on, those are the things that get done. Generally, we hope they get done on time, but they're at least done before we get checked on the report. What gets measured gets managed is something that I toss around quite a bit on my team because we are looking for metrics. We are looking for quantitative measures because I know, like, for example, for my kids' grades, I know that a 77% is not nearly as good as a 95%. So what do we do to get from that 77% mark to that 95? And it's the same way with your patching. Being able to report on your patching status down to the machine level is so critical, so important, and it prevents you from leaving that one sort of server out on an island that, oh yeah, that one app server that we forgot about. If it's reported on, somebody's going to track it. And then rinse and repeat. It's not a set in stone. I've talked to a lot of companies like, well, yeah, this is our patch policy. Well, when's the last time that you revised that, or when is it reviewed? We've done it the same way for the last 5 years, and understanding that the threat landscape has changed phenomenally, not just in the last 5 years, but in the last 5 months. Your patching program is something that just needs looked at and validated. Is what we're doing necessary? Do we have all the steps that we need? So looking at lists like this, is there anything that we're leaving out or anything that we could do better? I think every company has that endeavor to be better than we were yesterday. And with patch reporting and continuous improvement, that's how we get there. So some of you, I hope none of you have a guy in your organization that looks like this guy. I don't know what that smile means, but he looks frustrated. So how do we start with patch management? How do we approach it? Well, there's the machine level approach. Every time you configure a machine, you just tell it to download and install automatically. And I don't know how many of you are guilty or how many of you have users that are guilty of it, but I know every time Windows says, hey, I'd like to reboot, it's always when I'm super busy, I'm in the middle of this spreadsheet that my boss needs by like 3 o'clock yesterday, remind me later, or ignore, or maybe it never gets rebooted. How do you ensure that your patches are being applied? How do you stop, how do you force your users to practice that good hygiene on their workstations? Likewise with your servers. There's nothing like going into an environment and finding, a SQL server that hasn't been rebooted in 230 days because nobody's taking a look at it. Nobody's looked to make sure that the patches are taking. That kind of uptime usually indicates something's wrong, right? Usually with our servers, we're booting them once every 30 days. It may vary for your company just depending on what you're doing. I know companies that do nightly reboots, and I know some that do, they alternate every other month. Half their machines one month, half the machines the next month. That's all well and good. There's also patching tools out there. So something like SCCM, Configuration Manager, that's a Microsoft product. Avanti, ConnectWise offers a patch manager product. The big issue with those is they're not fire and forget. They're not the Ron Popeil solutions of set it and forget it. you do have to be, they have to be configured. Do you have the margin right now as a company to dedicate to that setup? That's going to be a project that somebody has to monitor, own. Otherwise, it's just a tool that you bought. And I think some of the executives in the call today know that, you know, there's tools that we buy and then we don't use them. I do that in my house. My son does most of our housework, so I don't know where my tools are. It's likewise in our business. We buy tools, but if we don't have a dedicated plan or a resource to configure and then own that tool and care and manage it, care for it and manage it, it's just going to sit there and you're going to forget about it until that renewal comes up the next year and it's like, oh yeah, we do have that product. So something to consider there is engaging an outside party just to come in and do the configuration training and help you set up a plan for that. Lastly, outsource it. That's something that we have several customers here at Choice Solutions in our managed services group, where instead of having to rely on separate teams with every company to research, understand, test those patches, we're able to provide that as a service and make sure that their patching is maintained and up to date. We do it for workstations and servers, and we know that it's not a cookie cutter solution. We partner with companies to understand the individual needs and requirements, that business conversation that we talked about in the last slide, because there's some machines that may need more care and love than others, let's be honest. But being able to do that for our customers allows them to benefit from the economy of scale. One team's research gets to benefit several organizations. So with that said, I will like to introduce our managed services director, Liam Catherall.
Wow, it's sometimes hard to find mute.
Liam, I think you muted yourself again.
Awesome. So did you hear anything?
No.
Okay, great. So I apologize about that. I thought I muted myself. I probably unmuted myself. Back on track here. As Chris was saying, part of our managed service offerings is patch management. And as it says on the screen, it's 24/7, 365 NOC that is watching for different alerts and patches, any 0-day alerts. We have engagements on an emergency basis. We deal a lot with, it's part of our not only operational tasks of patching, but it's for us, it's considered a security function, and our security team leads that patch management. And on top of that, we bump all those patches up against our compliance management products to validate after we patch that we're still good. In a former life, I was a CTO, and it was a while ago, and I put patch management more to fix people's blue screens when they popped up, because I considered it patching, not security at the time. Again, that was quite a while ago, and the more the sophistication of the hackers out there, the more and more that pushed everything to that security vector, and it's becoming more and more. We see news stories all the time about issues with hackers and ransomware, and as Chris was saying on earlier in the slides, that was a lot of those come in, and maybe through an email that people click on, but those emails then hit the vulnerable operating system. So if you're not on top of this, if you don't have the manpower, and I trust me, I know how difficult it is to try to manage those types of operations. It's not something that's an IT person that's in the building is the first thing they walk into. They usually walk in and someone grabs their ear and says, hey, I'm having trouble with this right now. And so a lot of the things that a managed service provider takes care of is those things in the background that sometimes get lost when trouble comes around. So patching not only operating systems, but software, third-party software, Chrome, Adobe products, that kind of thing that sometimes gets lost in translation as well. When some people think, okay, I did all my security patching in the OS, Microsoft patches, I should be good, right? Not necessarily. It's a lot of patches hit the vulnerable applications running inside. So it's a pretty difficult job, especially if you're down people or just have a few people on staff. But we also take care of not only the operating systems, third party, but the infrastructure as well. One of the tabs that Chris put up was a vulnerability that was infrastructure driven. That's again something that is hard to spend time on when you're in the day-to-day firefight that you might have in the IT side. Incidents come all the time, and preventive maintenance sometimes gets hit when it comes to that. Our standard practice with MS, our MS services, we patch operating or infrastructure once a quarter, at least review it once a quarter, unless we get messages from the vendors saying that there is a security issue, and then we do it as an emergency maintenance. As far as operating systems and Windows and whatnot, that we follow the kind of a standard procedure, unless again there's a huge security alert of allowing 1 weekend to go through to make sure that if there's any issues with patches, that on Patch Tuesday we allow 1 weekend to go through to let someone else be the guinea pig of trying to patch that. Usually that's enough time for enough people that do it immediately to find all the issues during a patch, and then so we do it. Our patching as an MS provider is the third and fourth weekend. And why you say third and fourth? Well, the third weekend we try to hit everybody, but as some of the IT folks know on the call, patches aren't always successful, and so we plan on the fourth weekend to remediate anything that didn't get hit. And again, this is all standard practices. If there's an emergency security alert, that's something that we do immediately. We contact our customers and give them a note that there's an emergency patch window that we need to create to overcome a threat that's out there.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you, Liam. And he brought up the infrastructure piece. This is really a combined effort. What I found is organizations where security is a little bit more than a watchdog, they're able to partner with those sysadmins and the folks who own those systems and know those systems. So it really gives an opportunity for the team to collaborate on that combined objective. So I think we had some time for some questions if anybody had any. And
Yes, let me take a look.
Okay.
I think we just had one from earlier. Yes, the one question that we did have was, how does cloud affect my patch management plan?
Sure. Well, that's a great question, especially as we go to a more hybridized sort of deployment. And there's companies that are fully cloud-based now. I know we were working with a customer that was born in the cloud. So we're seeing that more and more. Cloud security is a big part of our world. As far as patching, it really depends on the level of service that you're getting from that cloud provider. If you're looking at platform or infrastructure as a service where you own the operating system, yes, that will fall on your company to patch the same way you would your on-premise equipment. A lot of companies and cloud providers will, they'll provide an add-on service to assist with that, but at the end of the day, they're patched just like your operating system on the box that sits under somebody's desk. So Great question though, especially as we get, again, like I said, more and more into the cloud.
I might add to that a little bit, Chris.
Sure.
So patch management in a cloud environment it shouldn't really be treated any differently than patch management if you're locally hosted. As Chris says, it really depends on what kind of applications that you have out there. A lot of people who go to the cloud just uplift their infrastructure, so their Windows servers and Linux servers, Unix servers, and put them as is in the cloud. They're still operating systems that need to be patched, need to be monitored. AWS and Azure, they ensure their infrastructure is patched, but they don't ensure that your systems are patched. And if you're running applications out in those cloud environments that are running on servers with operating systems, you're as vulnerable as anybody if you don't have a patch management schedule around that. Another concern when it comes to just security in general in a public cloud is that there's a lot of ways to kick yourself and knock yourself for a loop inside of when you're configuring your infrastructure in the cloud. And if it really depends on how many hands you have inside your infrastructure. A lot of times it's the wild, wild west when it comes to your cloud infrastructure. And if you don't have a good governance plan, a security governance plan around, okay, this is how you deploy a server, this is how you get access into that server. It's really easy to click a button and now you have access to that device, whether a Windows server or anything else, from the internet, and it's wide open. And if you have a lot of cooks in the kitchen and they don't understand the governance around setting up your cloud, they can make you vulnerable and you won't even know it unless you have a good system that goes out and regularly checks how the system's connected and if your governance policies around putting things in the cloud have been met.
Great. Thanks, Liam. We actually do have one other question, and then we'll move on to the polls. But someone asked, I have automatic approval turned on for my Microsoft updates. I have only had one minor issue in 12 years. Why should I change?
Sure, yeah, that's another great question, and that's the approach that a lot of folks take. It's great that there hasn't been any issues. That's not to say that when I look at Microsoft specifically, their Windows updates, that there have been things that happen where there's a bug in the patch, right? Which is why we give sort of a cooling off period in our organization from release date to application. That glitch or that bug may not have been noticeable and may not have impacted any applications on your machine, but that's not to say it doesn't happen. So from an enterprise standpoint, we don't want to risk propagating that bug across, 20, 200, 2,000 machines. On an individual machine basis, absolutely, I have a test machine that it downloads and installs automatically, and that's how I can sort of get ahead of things, and that's what I use. But I also use that machine for, other things like connecting directly to the internet without a firewall. It's an abused machine. But to go back to your question, yeah, it's something that's probably worked a lot of times. I think putting more time around it and intentionality, I don't think that hurts at all for an organization.
And kind of the follow up on that, Chris, you talked about servers that haven't been rebooted in 400 days. Can you kind of address automatic updates with a 400-day server, online server?
Sure, yeah. And that would be a case of generally cumulative updates, we know for a fact generally require at least one reboot. And so for our team, an indication that updates didn't take is an exceptionally long uptime for a server. We actually have priority one alerts that go out for servers that have been up. I want to say we're set at 35 or 45 days because we know that within a month they need to have rebooted at least once, and it gets eyes on that machine. There may be a special case around that machine, it may be a special situation, or it's a really tight maintenance window, and so it may have reasons. I know we have one customer where they have a system where we do a supervised reboot, just because it's that business critical of a system. But yeah, when you start seeing those high uptimes and you're leaving it to Windows to sort of monitor itself, it could get you in a sticky situation where maybe a patch didn't apply, or there's other issues in play.
Great. And so, I'm sorry. So so if the servers have been automatically updated, normally you don't have them automatically reboot, and so you decide to get a maintenance window to reboot that, maybe overnight or over the weekend. So that's something that you have to address, because applying a patch and activating the patches is kind of separate processes. Some of those patches aren't in play until after you do the reboot.
And then what is the best way to maybe go about finding how up to date our environment is with patching?
Sure, there are assessment tools on the market. I know we offer it as part of our assessment for managed services environments. We have a tool that will go out and assess the patching level of the machines on the Active Directory domain, or the active domain. And that can be returned as a deliverable, just to sort of see where you are today versus where you want to be.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Chris. Okay, we're going to get into just the last couple poll questions, and then we'll wrap up. But just if you wouldn't mind just completing these last couple questions. So how relevant was the content presented today? 5 being excellent. If you wouldn't mind just taking the time, thank you. We'll give everybody a couple more seconds.
Yeah, Ellie, and this is Dana. We had a wide range of, from business executives to security analysts to IT managers, so a wide range of attendees today. And so with the content and how we approached it, putting it together, we definitely really value feedback here, so we can just understand to your roles the value of the content and meeting your needs on the information you took time to join us for.
Yep, thanks, Dana. Okay, and then possibly you can select more than one here, but what security topics would you like to see us cover in the future? Thank you again for taking the time. Okay, and then just the last question. Based on content covered today, is there anything that you would like Choice to follow up with you on? Okay. Well, if there's any other, did anyone else want to have any closing thoughts, or Dana, Liam, or Chris?
I'll just say thank you again to everyone who joined us. We definitely value your time. We know everybody's busy, and it's always our goal to put together events that bring insight and value to help you. So again, our goal, we want to see you guys being successful. We know there's constraints you're dealing with IT, and we know that cybersecurity and just there's a lot of things on everybody's mind, and making sure they're protecting their organizations the very best they can with the resources they have. And if there's anything we can do to play a part in helping you guys discuss ideas and potentially assist with anything, we'd certainly value that opportunity. So thank you again for your time, and great job, Chris and Liam, for sharing, and everybody enjoy your day. Thank you.